Welcome back to the Awakening Conversations podcast. My name is Kate and I'm here with my co-host Amanda. And in today's episode, we are exploring a charged and complex figure, Candace Owens. We're not interested in idolizing her or pedestaling her, and we're also not interested in condemning or furthering the mainstream narrative of who we are told that she is. Instead, we want to reflect on what she represents in the larger field of collective awakening. Now, we know that she elicits some very strong reactions from people, and we're not here to debate her politics or who she is. We're really interested in asking, why does she trigger such strong reactions? What does her voice represent in a world where self-censorship is the norm? And what does our reaction to her say about our own awakening? We feel that Candace represents more than just a single person, that she is in many ways an archetype. She represents a disruptor, a truth teller, a polarizer. And we're really, really interested in asking what it means when someone speaks out, especially when it can come at a great cost to themselves. And as always, we invite you to listen with curiosity. Feel free to suspend any strong feelings, judgments, emotions you have in this moment until the end of the episode, and really sit with the discomfort as we explore the energetic terrain beneath the surface. Amanda, really looking forward to this conversation with you because I know that we've kind of gone back and forth on it. And as we're going to really unpack here, there's a real feeling of, wow, how do we go about diving into a conversation like this? And then personally for me, lots of different weird feelings come up, like, should we even go there? Why is it so challenging for us to even start to have a conversation about someone such as Candace Owens and what she represents?
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, we have been on the receiving end of a lot of conditioning and programming about who she is. I realized this for myself back in 2020. I had a bit of an awakening about multiple public figures, and I realized that my perception of them was built off of the stories of narratives that were created about these people. I will say that the first person that actually really brought this to life is a very polarizing and triggering figure, and it's Donald Trump. I personally never cared for him, but I didn't really listen to him. I didn't really listen to those speaking that were really fervently against him either. But I was just absorbing the stories about who he is, what he said, like, oh, he said this crazy thing. And one day I was listening to this crazy thing that he supposedly said. I think it was like CNN was talking about, it was related to COVID, of course. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And then somehow I found myself actually listening to everything he said about it. And I was like, wait a minute, what they said about him and what he actually said, those are two different things. And it just like what can happen with an awakening is you realize one thing is a lie, and then you ask the question, what else is a lie? Right? And so I started digging in, and where else have they painted him this way? Whether he's a good guy or not a great guy, like, let's just be honest. Like, let's not create narratives about people. But what really taught me is that we need to have firsthand experiences with a person before casting judgment on them. Our stories about someone based upon what someone tells you who they are, or based upon what they're actually saying, what's our body actually telling us about these individuals. And so that happened with him. And then also multiple people, and Candace Owens being one of them. I didn't listen to her because I just heard she's right wing. She has crazy ideas. And then I started listening to her, and I'm like, well, I see why they want to quiet her up, because what I realize is that these people are calling out structures that are not serving the people, and they're calling out the status quo. And so I personally have listened to a lot of Candace Owens, and also because of the story that's been created about her, what people associate with her, she has all these labels, that these code words, backed up to the code words. I started to recognize that when code words were used, or I'd hear a code word for a person, like, oh, okay, I should go actually listen to what they're saying. For example, this person is a racist. This person is right wing. This person is a conspiracy theorist. Then that was the message to me. I'm like, okay, I need to go listen to the actual source and make up my own mind. And we live in this world where if I were to align with someone in certain ways, it doesn't mean I have to align with them in every aspect of who they are, what they believe, what they propose. But that doesn't mean that they're also this term that's being used by the power structure that's trying to discredit who they are. And so even knowing that, I still keep it to a limited circle in terms of I listen to what Candace Owens has to say. I've found that she's really in pursuit of truth. Like that's who I've judged her to be. She's someone who is trying, and whether she gets some things wrong or not, that is another, like, she doesn't have to get it right all the time, but what is underlying what she's doing? To me, she is pursuing truth, and that is quite dangerous. And so I understand why she gets put in these boxes. But like for us having to look at the discomfort of even being public and speaking that she might not be this horrible person that the narrative wants us to believe she is. Like that's actually, we risk people coming at us with those labels, right? And we've had these conversations about our voice and the body and how it's so important to use our voices, but it's also important to recognize where we are self-censoring and not speaking because we have these like invisible, unconscious, essentially like shackles on our voice that we don't speak because we see unconsciously, we see what happens if we step out of line with our voice. And so this, for me, I won't speak for you, but maybe you can share. For me, this is speaking what feels uncomfortable and risking what what do I fear is people coming at me and labeling me as whatever derogatory term they want to use and put me in a box. And I'll stop right there and pass the baton to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that comes up is, as we've prepared for this conversation, like what I really love about why we're talking about it is it's another piece of this awakening puzzle, right? Like as I keep saying, I feel like I keep saying, we're getting these really loud, clear, big opportunities, examples to have great insight, great awakening, great opening, great shifts in our life with all the things that are being presented. And here we have another one, because as you spend some time, doing your own observation of this person known as Candace Owens, you tap in from your, okay, let me take off the labels, how I've been told to perceive her, and listen for myself and listen to some of the content that she covers, and then, look into this current situation she's in, and we'll tap into a little bit of that just to give people who don't know an idea. But when we sit back and we do that, like, it's like, wow, like this particular situation to me really does feel like we're getting, again, this, like, I don't know, the fight between truth, voice, dark, the oppression is just going up and getting louder. I don't know. It's like, to me, I just get this upward energy of like, it's rising. It's like the battle's getting higher and we're fighting it out. And this woman is not afraid, and she's not really willing to back down, even though she's been really, pressured to do so. And my initial feelings when we did this was, that there's discomfort, because she's seen by many people in a certain way. What would that mean? What would people think if we even open the door, right? So my biggest fear is what other people are going to think. Then what are they going to how are they going to categorize me? Because I think the challenge is when people are labeled in these ways, as you said, conspiracy theorists, left, right wing, racist, we know who they are. We've closed the box. That's who they are. And so if we are to speak in any way that holds, really, we've got to allow the nuance here that people are not one thing. how can we listen to anything anyone's saying with breadth? And then I guess that beautiful word of nuance, like how can we hold all conversation in this broader frame to be like, as you just said, maybe some of what she's saying is right. Maybe some of it is wrong, but what is the intention behind what she's sharing? So yeah, for me preparing for this call, it's been this like, oh, like this feels edgy because like there's such a, what's the word? Like, well, there's so much, I want to say hate was probably a word, or dislike, and like labeling and judgment of who she is, like to get to that conversation, like, okay, like that can be reflected back to you. So that's where that self-censorship comes into our lives, is like, well, I might have taken the time to explore this and create my own self-assessment and judgment or opinion or beliefs, set my own beliefs, but I'm just going to keep that to myself, because if I was to say something, we're so quick to judge and label, oh, you're this, you're that, you're on that side and not that side. And that's just so black and white. And that means that we've closed the door on anything else being possible. And I think that's part of what this awakening and what she represents is really about, is seeing that there's more than just this black and white. How can we create that space for nuance? How can we even open the door to like learn more, give people the opportunity to present stuff to us, present, growth opportunities for us through what they share, rather than just going, it's this or it's that. Like that's what I really feel about that. I'm going to pause there.
Yeah. I agree so much with what you said. And the nuance is the word. The power structures cannot, I'm going to say, quote unquote, win with nuance. They have to create the extremes, and only if you don't side with us, it's like it's us or them. You either side with our viewpoint. If you even try to dance anywhere in the middle, we're going to label you and put you in that box over there. And people see that unconsciously. Like I remember in 2020, I just felt guidance to read 1984. And I remember walking on the beach and just feeling like having this really powerful vision of what self-censorship actually means, and like how big of a role that's going to play in the years ahead, and how the people in the middle, the nuanced people, are actually the larger group, but they're quiet because they see what happens if they try to express that nuance.
Yeah.
They get put in that category and it's just easier to not speak. And so there's this false perception of what people believe, because those that do see nuance, they're quiet. So it's social media, what's out there on the internet is distortion, and throw in isolation and people not interacting in person, and maybe people not losing the ability to, if they're online all the time and they're just getting this polarized view of the world, then you could go back into real life and it's like you mention a word that signals something. Oh, you're in that box. Oh,
Yeah.
my cousin is my cousin is this, like, and now families are divided, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy that they're not different people than they used to be, but we've been received this messaging of like, okay, they say this word, put them in that camp, don't associate with them, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and this is the self-censorship is perpetuated because of that. It's almost like it's a tool used to shut you up, like this labeling and then the shame that can come with that when we're perceived in a certain way, or these labels are used to discredit, and really to close us down and to shut us up.
Yeah, I think what we've 5 years out from 2020, right? That's pretty wild too. Like this really was this initiation of this censorship period. And now people are, I think, using my hands a lot, people are ready, feeling this activation, I think, to use our voices. And I think what Candace Owen represents is this person who, what's funny, that someone I listen to like refers to as Candace as a narcissist, and maybe there is some aspects of narcissism, but I think for someone to do what she's doing, I think there has to be a level of like self-importance to take on what she's taken on. And maybe we should just I imagine there's people listening and they know who Candace Owens is, or they've listened to her. But maybe let's just talk about what is happening right now that's bringing this to the forefront, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You want me to go?
Yes.
Okay. So Candace Owens is this is a recent development in terms of receiving a lawsuit against her from the President and First Lady of France, Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron. Candace published a series back in, I think, February of this year, in which she made a case that Brigitte is actually a man, which on the surface, she got laughed at and ridiculed for. Like, she did an episode where she spoke about it, but then she did this series, and what a lot of people who had no idea going into it walked away with a sense that there's a good chance she could be a man. She did this despite receiving legal letters from the president and the first lady leading up to her series. And with legal counsel, they proceeded to ask questions to decide whether they were going to proceed with the series based upon the evidence that they had collected. And the evidence that she had was not her own evidence. It was from a journalist, a regarded journalists and other journalists within France that have been researching this situation for many years. And so it's not like she just was on like Reddit or some like chat threads on the internet. This is someone who's actually published a book and they're suing him now for what they're claiming to be cyberbullying, but not defamation. And so this person published this book with all these claims, with documentation, using technology to look at these pictures that have been provided to suggest that Brigitte is actually a man formerly known as Jean-Michel Trignaud, which is her quote unquote brother, according to their story. I'm not going to get into the weeds, into the details. If you are curious, you can go watch the series because there's a lot to it. But what I think is quite remarkable is that most people, and I think this is what she highlights in the series, is that most people that have started to pursue this path in France have been targeted, and they stopped because they used legal tactics. If those didn't work, they used other types of tactics, allegedly. And she's like, I was only going to do one episode, but when you send me these legal threats, I'm going to do a whole series about it. And that is so different than what I would respond, I believe, as the mother of 2 children. She's a mother of 4. She was pregnant when she was doing this. I'm like, I couldn't imagine being pregnant, and like, it's a very vulnerable time, but to come out and do something that puts you at such risk, she was willing to do that in the pursuit of truth. And from my perspective, people could look at it as like, well, they could, turn it around and say she has other motives for doing it. But from my perspective, as a mother, I think most people, that having powerful elite people threatening you with legal threats, I think most people would stop, right?
Yes. Yeah. 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 But I mean, so yes. So she's really an example here of someone who believes there's a truth that needs to be shared, is willing to bet her career on it, her reputation. I think important part that you've mentioned there is like, she's a mum of 4. You mentioned to me before, like, wow, that's like, you want to protect your children. So then we have that instinct to say, well, I wouldn't want to put myself in a position where something could happen to me, to, my livelihood that supports my children. So therefore, I wouldn't say anything. We've got this woman here who's willing to speak out, in pursuit of truth, despite all that she has to risk. What has this got to do with the awakening? So we've been talking so much about the truth and how that feels in our body, and how there are a lot of people out there trying to, distort that, shut it down. And here is this really powerful example of, and, again, she could be incorrect, but someone who is in her belief, this is true, I am going to hedge my whole career in it and pursue this, what comes back? The thing that's really interesting, I think, about this case is that there are certain things that could have been said by the president of France and his wife to in all of the cases of people who have brought up this particular claim that could have closed it down. And unfortunately, they've never addressed that to do that. So therefore it's escalating. And I think that's part of her pursuit in this truth. What's really key here is that the tactics, once again, that are used when one is potentially going to expose something that brings down that power structure, brings down and exposes the back end, the workings of something that we have just been allowing to be controlling us, ruling us, and never questioned. And it's like the torch light shining on the dark, and the dark doesn't like that. So the dark's trying to consume the torch that's trying to show what's going on behind the front. And the awakening for us is well, really here what we're wanting to express is, where are we holding back the truths within us? Where are we afraid to speak out because of these structures that it's the labels, it's the shaming, it's the potential risks that come out, where are we holding back, denying truth, denying our own inner truth because of the fear of what others might think, the way we may be labeled? And how is that then perpetuating this other side? And what is our particular role then in looking at ourselves of, where do we self-censor? Where are we able to begin to maybe step into a role in different places in our lives where we can begin to express more truths? What does it mean when we collectively begin to speak more truths? How does that affect this other side? Are we willing to take the risks of what truth really means? And, even in us having this particular podcast episode, I can see it in us, it's challenging and hard to navigate all the parts of this conversation, because it's we're wanting to express something, aware of how one person is seen, and where she's such a powerful example for this light and dark battle, that we have our own inner physical, emotional, energetic experience of the discomfort of even approaching the subject of, truth, and speaking up against things that potentially, were really that exposure of dark and the pursuit of truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it really is everything on the stage. I think the public stage is really a part of this process of awakening. And you're talking about, where in us do we kind of contract at this idea, or we're just going to stay quiet? Well, those are learned patterns, right? We learn those in our childhood, and it's happening in other areas of our lives where we don't speak on a personal level. We're not speaking truth. It's easier just to not say anything at all, or look the other way. And so what I think is so cool is that, with her specifically, is that the more that she speaks, the more that they come after her. The more that they come after her, the more that she speaks. And what was quite fascinating is that there are people looking at this story that had no interest in looking at this series prior to this lawsuit, right? So this lawsuit, I think what was prompting this lawsuit is that, I mentioned to you earlier, it's like, Candace did not come from a wealthy background. Apparently her dad was a plumber, right? The fact that she has been able to use her voice, and the amount of power that this woman has with this voice, it shows that what happens when we start speaking. Another part of the story was, a few weeks prior to this lawsuit, she received a personal call from President Trump, and according to her, and he asked for her, this was back in February, for her to stop speaking about, they were just on the tail end of the series, and he asked her to stop speaking about Macron and his wife, because Macron had come and personally asked Trump to ask her to stop. And I don't know if it was said explicitly, but Candace received it as the the negotiations around the Ukraine and Russian war were dependent upon whether Candace would stop talking about his wife, which to me, it's like, wow, she has the power to influence global wars among like major wars by what she's saying about a leader. Number one, makes you think that if it was just nonsense, they would just like, be ignoring her, right? Like, how many conspiracies do people have about powerful people that are just, they're not, granted, they don't have as large audiences as Candace Owens, but the fact that they are pursuing her has shined a light on them and had the opposite effect, right? So Candace receives this request from the President of the United States of America. Then she receives this lawsuit. And what happens? People are looking at it in the United States. She's getting eyeballs all over the globe. The whole world is seeing this now. She's getting like there's news coverage in like Saudi Arabia and China, like all over the world from someone just using their voice and not allowing the power tactics that are used by those in power to keep people from calling out what they see. And so this is really unprecedented as far as anything like legally. Like, I've been listening to what lawyers have to say, and legally it's unprecedented. And so it's kind of wild to think that, you know, this is going to be really interesting, like the history books or like looking back in history, whether we have history books or not in the future, I have no idea. But like looking back in history, to think that like this has the power, like this is not just about her being a man either. And I'm not going to go into that here. People can go watch it to understand what I'm talking about. But it's about power structures. It's about how elites operate. And so this has the potential to shift things on a global and exponential scale from my perspective. And to, you know, she's going to be in the history books because she used her voice.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what you've just really spoken to there is like, not only is what it really is a powerful example of really where it can go, because she's just in many ways, as you said, like an ordinary person who's come from very ordinary backgrounds, who has been someone that has felt like my voice is important and I want to do that. And as you said, it takes a certain type of person to have that confidence and, you know, maybe just like self-importance or whatever it is, to like, I matter and my voice matters. But look what happens when, you know, exactly like, I don't know, again, just keep on doing this with my hands, like how powerful that can be with that conviction, the willingness to seek whatever you feel might be a truth, just to not be afraid, and like really where it can go. Because exactly, you've got a podcaster who is being sued by the French government. Like the power of that, exactly. Like this is also part of the awakening now, not to say that we're here all to pull down and the power structures, but what we have is a power in our voice to speak out against atrocities that we see, to speak out against wars that we see that we don't align to, just to be reminded that it is powerful to use the voice, especially when we align it to, you know, our values, what we see as, you know, the vision for the future of humanity that is the opposite of the, you know, craziness that we're seeing and going through. Like us vocalizing those other options, you know, forwarding the narrative, forwarding the story, really trying to create other options, alternatives, ways for us to live, think, feel, you know, have an economy, do schooling, do healthcare. Like your voice matters, right? Like those ideas that we have and we hold and those feelings that are inside us, they're no good just sitting in there being dreams. Like it's such an extreme example of the power of voice, right? And that conviction of your truth or a truth, right? It could potentially move mountains, you know, if we were to really believe it and pursue it, despite whatever, you know, negative feedback we might get or shut down, or, you know, the labels we may receive from friends, family, like you're crazy, that's never going to happen, you're you're whatever. If it is a truth and it truly is a vision that we hold for something else, like it has to be extracted through the voice for it to have its power, and that is what she's an example of. And that relentless pursuit, whether right or wrong, for in her case, it'll be revealed, but it feels like something major will be revealed, because they just can't just like prove things that need to be proved. Like, I think we all know where we might be heading, but it is just the power that we have within our voice. Like, it's a phenomenal example of that.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I was reminded that, she was a part of a larger alternative podcasting network, right? She had a job, she was employed, but then she was crossing lines of what was allowed to be spoken about. And you see, it's an interesting exercise to watch that there are people who stay within the guardrails of what's acceptable to speak about, because that's where their livelihood is. She might have, she's married to British, not royalty, but like British, someone, a son of, I think he's someone from Parliament. Her husband's dad is in like British Parliament. And so I imagine there is wealth there, I imagine. And so I imagine that's helpful for her. And, but I don't think it's any mistake that that's who she married. And, because it supported her in this mission that she has to follow her convictions and speak about when she sees corruption and injustice. And that's what I see her doing. But anyway, so she crossed the what's considered acceptable, right? Like there's the window of what you can speak about. She crossed the line. She got fired. And so she built her own website, and she's recording from her basement, right? So the fact that, this is just an example, and what can happen. You mentioned podcasts, right? Like podcasts are destroying the old media control structure of, these are the sound bites. This is the narrative. This is what we speak. This is what we program our people with. Because podcasts are an opportunity for us to see and hear people authentically speak and really get a sense of who is this person. If you talk about Joe Rogan, for example, they've tried to cancel him because he does not fall within any box that they want to put him in. Within the COVID time frame, he was taking an unacceptable treatment. So they put him on CNN, slapped a green filter on him, and they've made claims about him. But people have listened to him speak for hours and hours and hours. That is something that you can't fabricate, right? You can't, and people have a sense of who he is. Yeah, they don't know who he is, like when he's with his wife, but you can't fake all those hours where he's just, having these really authentic, not really structured conversations. They have a sense of, I know who this is, much more than they know who someone on the news is that's like reading a script that's not showing any of their personality. And so that is changing the power structure in terms of who has the power, right? Someone like Candace Owens can have as much influence as she has because she is following her what feels true for her. She's speaking about it fearlessly, and she's created a relationship and a connection with her audience, which the old structures do not have.
Yeah. It also made me just think, like in both examples, like Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, whoever, we can feel their authenticity. We can see that they're coming from whatever place they're coming from, what their intentions are. Is it to seek, to broaden the conversation? Is it in a pursuit of truth? That doesn't mean we agree with all the things that they say, but it's about learning to hold the breadth of that conversation and not narrowing it down to she's this, he's that. What they say is this, because there's our limitation. There we're in the control. There we're just shut down to this is how it is. It cannot be any other way, right? That's what we're awakening from and into the ability to hold the broader picture, to question the narrative, to question the control mechanisms, to question how things have been. And yeah, the power of the voice and these conversations is where we're doing that. Not everyone that they interview and all of that is going to come in with, not everything is truth, right? Not everything that we hear is something we have to like just take on and believe. That's when that body comes back into it. As we've been saying in our last couple of episodes, or the last one particularly, our body is this barometer for truth. And in a world filled with information, that is what we want to keep leaning back into. But really recognizing where we label others and we categorize and like even narrow down our own perception because we're limiting our own experience of life. We're awakening to the fact that there's so much more going on. Can you start to look at your own barriers, the places where you're containing yourself, where you're censoring yourself, what more wants to be said? Where could you speaking more of your own personal truth powerfully impact your own life, even in the smallest of ways, if it's in your relationship? Yes, we said there that, you could have the power to like change governmental structures if that's so what you want to pursue, but you could just stop self-censoring to have this, incredible benefits within your own life. Speaking up at a job, speaking up in a relationship, like taking a stand for yourself, whatever it might look like. And how could that change things for you? How could that be an awakening process for you? How could that be the growth process for you? Something else that I was going to say, like we find these figures really triggering because we do self-censor, and we see them speak so freely, and we see them, like being quite bold and brave and like out there on the edges. And whether we agree or not, like it was a reflection and a mirror back to us where we don't do that. When we don't say what we feel, we don't say what we think, we don't speak our truth, we hold back, we people please, we, as we said, even in this podcast when we first began, like it was like I don't know, something here where the channel would open and then some other word would want to come up and like, no, that one can't come through. Like so much of a sensation of like, oh, I can't say that. What would people think if I say that? Like they are these powerful reflections for us, and our discomfort and some of what we throw at them and label them with is purely, if we want to come back to our projection, like it's a way of deflecting the thing we want to look at within ourselves of like where we don't allow ourselves the freedom to say what we want to say, or are unable to articulate our truth, or just lost in our minds, or have never really practiced speaking from a place that's more authentic, or just we don't allow ourselves to be authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've said a lot there. Yeah, and what I was thinking, continuing on what you just said, it's when we're putting them in boxes, like that's what we're doing to ourselves in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're not allowing ourselves to be nuanced human beings, multidimensional human beings that have paradox, and you can be this and you can be that. It's like trying to fit ourselves into a world that says you can't be all these things that you feel called to be. Like, so what comes to mind right now is High School Musical. It's a
Mm-hmm.
cheesy Disney musical, but my daughter was in the play, so it forced me to become familiar with it. And it's all about, in high school, there's the jocks, there's the drama kids, there's the bookworms or whatever. And the 2/3 of the way through, all of them start coming up like, well, I have this secret desire, like to bake, like that's a boy, or I have this, they all have these like secret urges that they've been containing because they're trying to, it's a very simplistic representation of this. But like, in what ways are we living in these boxes that we believe that we're supposed to be living in?
Yeah.
And that whole idea of, keeping people in boxes, it's in a way keeping ourselves contained and not free and not able to be the expression that we came here to be in whatever form that is, because we're this. I live by this label. And so it's like, let's stop labeling other people, especially from not having firsthand experiences with them.
Yeah. You
You
don't
think
know them.
like, no, or if you haven't even listened, like a lot of people haven't even like That's crazy what Candace Owens is saying. Oh, did you
Yeah.
listen to the series? Well, no, I'm not
Yeah.
going to give that my attention. Well, it's
Yeah.
like, you're taking what the authorities are telling you is true,
Yeah.
and you're not passing it through your own the actual evidence that she's presenting. You're not passing it through your own filter.
Yeah.
And whether it's Candace Owens or this is a mechanism that's used
Yeah.
all throughout everything that we're seeing on
Yeah.
the world stage. And so this is just one representation that I think is going to
Yeah.
bring it to light for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, where are you? Assuming you know someone,
Mm.
you know the truth,
Yeah.
and get curious, and you won't, like, sometimes it's uncomfortable listening to someone that we have a preconceived notion about, right? Or someone
Mm-hmm.
who's speaking differently than the belief system that we have created,
Yeah.
story that we believe to be true. And it's really uncomfortable to challenge that.
Yeah.
But that's part of this process as well, is really
Mm-hmm.
like looking at our stories. And I've been listening to people who, have very different viewpoints on similar situations to see, like, how did they get there?
Yeah.
Do they have good points? Because it can strengthen either how I see things, or it's good to know the counter argument on anything. So if you believe that Candace Owens, or fill in the blank with any other controversial person, is
Mm.
this, well, let's challenge that. Let's
Yeah.
listen to what they say. Labels are really used to stop us. Like, we can't listen to them because
Mm.
they're this, they're that
Mm-hmm.
terrible
Mm-hmm.
of a human being. What's dangerous is if people listen to them and they aren't as crazy. I sense like empathy from that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sense
Yeah.
their humanity.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's dangerous
Yeah.
to the status quo and the structure, right? Is if
Mm-hmm.
we see that the people that are disrupting things actually are not these monsters that they've
Yeah.
built them up to be.
Yeah. And I think it can also be confronting when we do our own watch, and then you're like, oh, I judged that person. I had put them in a box, and I know even when I began to watch her, Candice, I not didn't really know much about her, but I knew she was quite vocal, I guess is the word. And so I did even go into like watching with like, a sense of like, I'll just see what this is about. I'll give it an episode or two, and then and I was like, okay, wait a second, I need to watch some more of this. I don't necessarily love her style. I think there's definitely, some things in there that I don't resonate with her. But overall, it's like I felt like exactly there's a background of some level of integrity that she's trying to hold while presenting, this particular situation to the public. And, it's like getting to have that experience for myself to test my own like assumptions about things as well, because again, I think it's just like when we've let other people tell us who other people are, like we've just closed off the door to things being different. We've got to be able to like let go of that and make the decisions for ourselves, exactly, because there's so much historically that we've been told is how it is, and it isn't. And these are more examples of that are just coming in and like being thrown in our face as just like fodder for our awakening. Like we could just, so much every day that we can just chew on, chew through, pass through. How does this sit with me? What questions does this bring up in me? What are my triggers telling me about myself, my experience? Like, it's just this constant offering of different ways for us to be looking within and understanding ourselves and our beliefs about the world that really are aiding this mass awakening that we're going through. And, this is, again, not going to be the last thing. Like, we're just in this massive time of like constant exposure. And, I think really key here, where we're looking at where we have made assumptions about anyone else, judgments about anyone else, can we visit them to see, is there truth to that? Isn't there? It makes me even think about our conversations about Mark Gaffney, like, yeah, okay, we've discussed him in several episodes. And if you think we're wrong, go and do that research. Like, and whether we're right, whether we're wrong, whether our read on things is in alignment with yours, like, you do the work, you do the research, you go in and feel your way through that. And again, it's just coming back to that thing that we've been really harping on about in the last few months here, is like what you feel. What is that resonance that you feel within, that discord that you feel, and really learning to use that discernment and trust your own instinctual understanding of what's truth and what isn't. And how can you broaden your own range to allow nuance so that you can just broaden your sense of like seeing the world? Like, how can you notice what blinders you might have on just because you might be brought up in a certain way to think this is how the world should be, and anything outside of that is wrong or bad or evil or whatever other label there might be for that. Because when we can take that out, like, this is the sort of the shift and the change, and we can see things in a much broader, newer way, and that affects us to act different, be different, choose different, live different, feel different. It's a quite liberating process.
Yeah, I feel as though something that you said about the labels of that we internalize from other people. What came to mind is that, where are we doing that to ourselves? Like, where are we believing we are a certain way because we've received ideas from others, from the outside world, about who we truly are? And so, like, this whole, as you mentioned, it's like this whole awakening process is like this continual unraveling of everything that we believe about ourselves, about in the greater world of reality, right? We have these stories of what we believe truth to be. And what we're seeing right now is like those truths are coming undone at the seams. And that's, a lot of people are holding on because that's really uncomfortable to have the reality, to have to question everything. It's like, once you start questioning, it's like, oh, I mean, in a way, I like it better because I can just say, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm okay with my belief about something changing. You don't have, like, once you start letting go of the really deep ingrained stories that we've lived with, that we've thought define who we are, what our world is, once we start to examine them, it's easier. Like, we don't hold so tightly, right? And I think I was just listening to an interview with Kyle Cease earlier, and it was really interesting. He shared about his process of, he was a comedian. Like, he started in comedy when he was like 12 years old. Started when he started 15, he started getting these paid gigs. And then he was in a couple of movies, and then he started to have panic attacks, and he started to realize that he chose comedy as a protective mechanism against his father. And he just let go of every aspect of who he thought he was. And it was like the most liberating experience to go through, to recognize that everything that he believed himself to be was just illusion. And, that's it's scary. That can be scary, right? But at the same time, it's what, if we're not willing to go there, things get really uncomfortable, right? In this reality that we're existing in, with the energies changing as they are. If we're not willing to let go, life is going to be hard. And these awakenings keep getting more crazy, more intense, more like, what the heck is going on in our world? Because there's people holding on really, really tightly. And it's going to keep getting crazier and crazier. And I just I'm like, I love roller coasters. It feels like a roller coaster that we're on. Now that I know it's happening, I understand the game that's being played. So I can just ride the wave. And but for those really holding on tight to the stories of what they thought this world is, it's going to be hard because things aren't going to quiet down until the huge, it's undeniable, right?
Yeah. It just makes me think, like, as I've said, like, there keeps being these big things. Like, I really wonder what the moment's going to be when we actually get to the, like, 0 point. What are we going to have experienced? Where will we have gone? What will be the moment? And will it be a moment? Will it be like, calling the end of a war and now it's, the war is over? Like, what is that moment going to be where we're like, oh, we made it through. Holy shit, that was wild. Now what? Let's turn towards these amazing things we're going to build. But, as you said, like, there's so much more of this to come. And I think this particular topic that we brought forth today, bring forth Candace Owens as this really big example of how she evokes some big feelings in people. She also really threatens the structures. She is a representation of the times, content of what she says aside, the energetics of what she does, and her pursuit of truth is a powerful part of the awakening. What it's going to expose will be, is to be seen. But then, the question really is for us in this moment, like, how is she a mirror for what's in us that's being held back, that is shut down by the power structures that have been? Where can we reclaim some of our own voice and our power? Where do we want to begin to use that? What do we need to look at to heal in order to feel more free, to be authentic and real? And, really, what are the powerful things that can change for us when we do that inner work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even just as we spoke about, even this conversation for us is going to the edge of what's discomfort for us, because that's where we grow. And, maybe we'll be called racist for talking about an African-American woman. But, that's part of the process. Like, we have to be able to speak, and risking that we're going to receive the fear of what's going to come can't stop us from saying what we feel called to say. And so I feel like we've come a long way in this journey. Something that Vanessa said in our last conversation was that how using your voice is a muscle that, she didn't say it in these exact words, but it really is something that you cultivate, and you can get out of practice, like not riding a bicycle or getting out of the groove of it. And it's really this thing that we can take for granted. But I feel like all these episodes that we've recorded, regardless of whether people have been listening or not, just like us being able to move this energy, like we talked about in the last episodes, moving this energy out and going to places like we couldn't have spoken about this topic 50 episodes ago, because we just hadn't cultivated our own sense of knowing, of being, and the confidence that what we feel to be true or not true, and to be able to speak it in with nuance, realizing that we can speak about something that is controversial, and those that can receive it, that are like listening with good faith, can receive our intent that we're coming to this conversation with, that we're really here in the pursuit of something altruistic and with the desire to help in this process of awakening. And when we receive comments that are just maybe nasty or like just not really thoughtful, meant to be hurtful, like, to me, it doesn't even touch me where it would have touched me like 50 episodes ago, because I'm like, that's not where we are anymore. And it's like, once you get to a certain place of, we'll say, frequency, like, that's not true. And so therefore it doesn't land. Like, and for myself, I've only gotten here through all of these conversations that we've had. And so, the more of us that, wherever you are, just start talking, like start having the conversations with the people. Don't have arguments, have real, like, come with curiosity, come with authenticity, come with a desire to understand, and maybe have conversations with people who don't necessarily see things eye to eye, but they're willing to have a good faith conversation, ask questions why they believe the way they do. And I think that's where we need to go in order to, relearn how to have this art of conversation. I think we spoke about that last week, but yeah, so this has been a good conversation. Thanks for doing the growth work with me and being this partner in exercising of the voice, and it's been a good process.
Yeah, thank you. I agree 100% and hope that in some way, for those listening, that, yeah, you've come to understand that it is a practice and sometimes the edges feel really hard and challenging to speak through. And today was definitely one of those for us. And you do it anyway, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's just, the power of the voice and the clearing, I think, is really what you spoke to there, of like, you just clear out some of the junk and, exactly, you get to really come into the truth, more of the truth of who you are, so that any labels, anything negative that comes in, it kind of rolls off, which is an incredible feeling because it never used to be like that. Yeah, to be able to know, no, this was me in my truth. This was me doing the best I could on that day to express that truth. And so, yeah, really inviting those listening to begin wherever they are to use theirs too. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll join you in the next episode.